A boy gave his lunch to a beggar on the street, even though he knew he would go hungry. The man looked up at him, surprised, his weathered face softening into a smile as he accepted the offering. "Thank you, son," he said hoarsely. "Bless you." Rahul smiled shyly, not wanting to draw too much attention to himself, and quickly walked away. He tried to ignore the gnawing hunger in his stomach as he continued his way to school, knowing he'd have to wait until dinner to eat again. The streets of Jaipur bustled around him, the familiar sounds of vendors shouting and cycle rickshaws weaving through traffic, blending into a background hum. The day passed in a blur for Rahul, his focus constantly wavering. He thought about the man he had helped and wondered if his small act of kindness had made any difference. By the time the final bell rang, he was more than ready to head home. He met his younger sister, Priya, outside her school, and they began the long walk back to their modest two-room house on the outskirts of the city. Their mother, Meena, was waiting for them, her face tired but lit up with a smile as she saw her children. She worked long hours cleaning houses in the wealthier parts of Jaipur, barely making enough to cover their expenses since their father had left 2 years ago. That evening, as the family sat down to a simple dinner of roti and dal, Rahul hesitated before speaking. "I gave my lunch to someone today," he admitted, his voice quiet. Meena looked up from her plate, her brow furrowing slightly. "You shouldn't go hungry, beta," she said gently. "You need to take care of yourself, too." Priya, who was only 6, piped up with a wide-eyed question. "Why did you give it away, Baya?" Rahul hesitated, trying to find the words to explain. "He needed it more than I did," he finally said, hoping that was enough. The next morning, the harsh buzz of Rahul's alarm clock pulled him from a restless sleep. He got up quietly, not wanting to wake Priya, and got ready for another day. Meena was already in the kitchen, her movements methodical as she packed their lunches. "Here," she said, handing Rahul his tiffin box. "And eat it this time, okay?" He nodded, guilt tugging at him. He hated making her worry, knowing how much she already carried on her shoulders. As he walked Priya to school, Rahul couldn't help but glance around for the man from the previous day. He didn't see him, but the memory stayed with him, nagging at the edges of his mind. By the time he reached his own school, his thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Hey, Rahul," called out Manish, one of his classmates. "Did you finish the math homework?" Rahul shook his head. "Not yet. I'll do it during the break." Manish frowned. "You really should keep up, yeah? You used to be so good at this stuff." Rahul nodded absently, the weight of his responsibilities making it hard to focus on anything else. The day dragged on, with Rahul feeling increasingly out of place among his peers. At lunchtime, he sat alone, opening his tiffin to find a small portion of rice and vegetables. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the beggar again, wondering if he was okay. When the final bell rang, Rahul hurried out of the school and back to the street where he'd seen the man. To his surprise, the man was there, sitting against a wall with his head bowed. "Hello, sir," Rahul said hesitantly. The man looked up, his eyes weary but kind. "Ah, it's you," he said with a faint smile. "Thank you for yesterday." Rahul shifted awkwardly. "Are you okay?" he asked. The man shrugged. "As okay as I can be, I suppose. Life has been hard, but your kindness reminded me that there are still good people in this world." Rahul felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to say something, to do more, but he didn't know how. Over the next few days, Rahul began visiting the man, whose name he learned was Raghu. He brought him small offerings when he could spare them, a piece of fruit, a leftover chapati, and listened as Raghu shared stories of his life. Raghu had once been a teacher, but a series of tragedies had left him homeless and alone. Rahul found himself drawn to the man's wisdom and gentle demeanor, despite his circumstances. At home, Meena began to notice Rahul's distracted behavior. One evening, as they sat together folding laundry, she asked, "Beta, is everything all right? You've been quiet lately." Rahul hesitated before telling her about Raghu. To his surprise, she didn't scold him. Instead, she listened intently, her eyes softening with understanding. "Kindness is never wasted," she said finally. "But you have to be careful too. You can't pour from an empty cup." The following week, the principal called Meena to the school for a meeting. Rahul's grades had been slipping, and his teachers were concerned. Mina was embarrassed but promised to help her son get back on track. That evening, she sat Rahul down and explained the importance of balancing his responsibilities. "You have such a big heart, Beta," she said. "But you can't forget about your own future. If you want to help people like Raghu, you need to do well in school first." Rahul took her words to heart and began trying harder in his classes. Though his visits to Raghu continued, one day he arrived to find Raghu coughing violently, his face pale and gaunt. "You need to see a doctor," Rahul said urgently. Raghu shook his head. "I can't afford it," he said simply. Rahul felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. He ran home and told Mina, who immediately sprang into action. She contacted a local clinic where she worked part-time and arranged for Raghu to be seen by a doctor. The diagnosis was grim. Raghu had pneumonia and needed hospitalization. Mina managed to get him admitted to a government hospital where he could receive the care he needed. Rahul visited him every day after school, bringing Priya along sometimes to cheer him up with her drawings. Slowly, Raghu began to recover, though the experience left a lasting impact on Rahul. One afternoon, as Raghu rested in his hospital bed, he said to Rahul, "You've done so much for me, lad, more than anyone else has in years, but you have to promise me something." Rahul nodded, leaning in to listen. "Promise me you'll focus on your education. You have a bright future ahead of you, and that's how you can truly make a difference." Rahul nodded solemnly, the weight of Raghu's words sinking in. He returned home that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. He started studying harder, with Mina's guidance, and began excelling in his classes once again. His teachers noticed the change and praised his efforts, which gave him a newfound confidence. Months passed, and Raghu was eventually discharged from the hospital. With Mina's help, he found a small room to rent and began tutoring children in the neighborhood to earn a living. Rahul continued to visit him, though their roles had shifted. Now, Raghu encouraged Rahul to dream bigger, to think about how he could help others on a larger scale. When Rahul graduated from high school, Raghu and Mina were there to cheer him on, their pride evident. As Rahul prepared to leave for college, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. He promised to stay in touch with Raghu and to continue helping others in whatever way he could. Years later, Rahul returned to Jaipur as a young man with a degree in social work and a vision for change. With the support of his family and the lessons he had learned from Raghu, he started an organization to provide education and healthcare to underprivileged communities. The first center was opened in the very neighborhood where he had met Raghu, and it was named in his honor. Rahul often thought back to the day he had given his lunch to a stranger. That small act of kindness had set in motion a series of events that transformed not just his life, but the lives of so many others. It was a reminder that even the smallest gestures could ripple outward, creating a wave of change that could touch countless lives.